he plotted it out, and then we went into a period of visual development to to show him some of the ideas I had based on his story ideas, and I was pretty nervous, I think, in the beginning because Mike's up there in the pantheon of my favorite artists.
All right, I am here with legendary cartoonist and animator Bruce Zick. Welcome to the Comix Asylum Podcast. It's great to have you on board here. And we've been friends for a long time, but now we're getting a chance to talk about, we had a chance to talk about one of your previous books, The Zone Continuum.
All
And
right.
now we're getting a chance to talk about something special that you've got cooking. So first of all, Bruce, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I hope you can see me okay, and I hope I'm looking good this morning.
Oh, absolutely. The West Coast air is treating you well. Let's put it that way.
Yes, yes. I'm very fresh and sunny and happy here in the on the West Coast.
Excellent, excellent. So, you've got a really special project that you're a part of with one of the legendary figures in comic books. What can you tell us about Captain Henry and the Graveyard of Time?
Well, I can't tell you anything about it, Steve. I'm sorry. So,
All right, that's it, folks. We're done. See you next week.
well, it's interesting because I honestly don't know how much to tell because I have to stay behind what Dark Horse releases in terms of non-disclosure. Uh, but based on the PR that's been released so far and what I know is out there on the internet, it's a really unique project, both for me and I think for the Hellboy universe because it it kind of leaves the wheelhouse of what Hellboy generally does, which is more in the supernatural and magical fantasy horror kind of genre, I guess. And this is a lot of science fiction, but not like science fiction from, say, like a high tech or Star Wars in space or other kind of science fiction we know. It's a retro kind of old world science fiction. So in some respects, it's sort of still, I think, tucks into the Hellboy world because there's obviously um, science fictiony kind of elements in Hellboy with machinery and gadgets and science to some degree. But I think having said that, it still is a departure from what people mostly expect in Hellboy.
Sweet. So it's got a little bit of a Jules Verne kind of feel
Right,
to it.
Jules Verne feel, and there will be monsters. There will be a lot of monsters, and there is definitely horror elements in it. But I think because the project deals with uh, a new version of what time travel is all about, and time travel almost like from a Victorian point of view. So it's
Very
almost
cool.
it's almost right around, say, the time machine literature of H.G. Wells, say. So it's a little H.G. Wells-ish, Jules Verne-ish kind of a mash, but it's it's still a Hellboy kind of book, I think. But it introduces a whole new group of characters. So Captain Henry is the this hero of the story. He's a soldier of fortune, and he gets pulled into this what we think is going to be sort of a Victorian uh, storyline, but then it all goes south as a lot of stories do, and we kind of go through the rabbit hole, and then from there on, it's just crazy, wild adventure for poor Captain Henry.
Sweet. That sounds amazing. And it's coming up from Dark Horse, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken. And
Yes,
it's a 4-issue miniseries.
it's a four-issue miniseries. The first book comes out October 22nd. So there's still time to tell your stores to save you a copy and make sure they order a lot of extra books because I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, I can imagine. As excited as we are to have a new Hellboy project
Mhm.
in our hands, what was it like when you were even approached to work with Mike Mignola on something Hellboy related?
Well, I have to say, I kept bugging him a lot. I, I approached him basically. So it started off in social media. I was posting some artwork, and Mike was also on the social media platform, and so he had, I think, left a comment, and I was going, "Oh wow, Mike Mignola made a comment about one of my artwork pieces," and so I direct messaged him, going, "Hi Mike, love your work. You're one of the few guys in the industry that I would love to work with someday." And then he replied, "That sounds great. We should do something definitely." And as things often go, it took a long time for it to actually really happen. There was years where I think we were both busy and we were just not really connecting. But every 6 months, I would shoot him a message. Hey, Mike, hope you're doing well. Love to work with you someday. And that was it. And then finally, like a year and a half ago, Mike responded and goes, "Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready." So that was like a big electrical jolt to the system going, okay, this is really going to happen now. So
Cool.
that's when we started actually collaborating at the very beginning.
Oh, that's amazing. And so you're a co-writer on this.
Right. I'm a co-writer. It's Mike's plot, and it's Mike's idea. I had some ideas. He had some ideas. We sh shot some things around for a while, but ultimately, I think Mike had this idea in the back of his head already, and he thought this would be the right place for doing this particular storyline. So he just kind of went for it, and then I went, "Oh, this is good. Okay, I'm I'm going to do what Mike is talking about because it sounds too wonderful not to do it in the way he's seeing it." So he plotted it out, and then we went into a period of visual development to to show him some of the ideas I had based on his story ideas, and I was pretty nervous, I think, in the beginning because Mike's up there in the pantheon of my favorite artists. I mean, I could and storytellers. I could name maybe 10 or 12, and he's up there. And I admire his work so much, and it has influenced me in the past. And so I was nervous and maybe tentative in the beginning, and also in any new project in the beginning, you're just not fluid with it yet, and you need to work on it for a while before the real ideas start percolating. So um, I think when I did like a second batch of sketches on the character ideas and some world building, visual development, then it started gelling, and he got on board at that point with everything I was doing, and then I just completely relaxed, and we nailed all the main characters going back and forth, and he just sort of at that point greenlit what I was doing, and then once I had gotten his final plot outline, then I was free to actually write the story and flesh out the pacing and the details of each book and do the dialogue and whatnot. But Mike did a lot of dialogue, I'd say, in book one. He wanted to kick it off in a familiar setting that the readers could really relate to as a Hellboy kind of a story. And this was when the story first is set in the Victorian time in our everyday world, and it's kind of got a Ghostbusters kind of monster vibe to it. And but from a Victorian point of view, the Captain Henry is hired to put on this looks like a deep sea diving kind of dimensional travel suit, and he goes into a ghost world to try to basically be a ghostbuster to help this family that's hired him to find their uncle who's died, but they feel his presence is still around, and so Captain Henry is kind of scientifically thrown into an alternate dimension of the house that he's in where he can try to find the uncle. And so that and it works with some familiar Hellboy characters. I'm drawing a blank right now on the Witchfinder, Mr. Gray. He is one of a staple of Hellboy characters. So it's starting off very much like a Hellboy book, and then boom, it goes south, and then now we're in new territory, and then the rest of the book just kind of spirals into stranger and stranger story ideas.
Well, that sounds amazing. And the one thing that that strikes me from what you just said is that with all your experience, because you've been in the biz for like 30 years, for 3 decades, that even with your experience and your talent and all the projects you've worked on, your own stuff, Zone Continuum, Primordial, you've done work for Marvel with Thor, you've
Mhm.
done a lot of work in animation, and you've worked for like George Lucas and Spielberg and Coppola in film, and you're still nervous.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that shows you just how much I admire and respect what he does. I mean, he is pretty amazing, and he's still a juggernaut of creativity. I mean, he I don't think there's any chance that he'll ever slow down. I just think he just keeps going, and maybe he's less interested in Hellboy books in the sense that he can collaborate with other people who will also write or illustrate the books, and he's willing to let that much of Hellboy go to other people. But now he's also creating a whole new mythology in a book series that started with Bowling with Corpses, was the first graphic novel of his new endeavor. And so he's off on his new adventure, kind of like Captain Henry, and he's chronicling new story ideas and doing fine art as well. So um, yeah, I was nervous. Uh, I kept thinking, second guessing myself that maybe I should make this kind of look like a Hellboy book. Like I didn't want it to be a total departure. But then I started getting a lot of the other Hellboy books that have come out over maybe the last 15 years or so. And I realized that he does let the artists kind of do their own thing. And some artists you can tell really try to stay with the flavor of how Mike illustrates, but other artists just totally did their own thing. And so I went, oh, okay, then that's cool. I can do that too. And also, Mike wanted to work with me because of what I've done in the past. So I think he wants me to do what I do. So that helped loosen me up. And then I think in the back of my mind, I'm always still thinking, yeah, Hellboy, Hellboy, Hellboy. But I mostly felt free to just do my own style and be unencumbered with second thoughts about it.
That's great. That's good. That's good to hear, because like the one thing I was thinking about was his style is so distinctive,
Right.
and your style is very distinctive as well too.
Yeah.
And so how do you approach it where you want to keep some of him but also keep some of yourself?
right.
And how do you then approach the pages? Because then do you approach the pages different, not only with the design work and the world building, but also with the pacing and the storytelling?
Right. Well, there for sure is a way that Mike composes pages that is very uniquely his style. And I think for a short time I was going, maybe I should do that too. But then it doesn't really fit my style. And I kept wanting things to be bigger and more immersive because I really wanted to be in a world building vein of storytelling. And so I think I was leaning towards bigger and bigger kind of panels and and that was part of the letting go process. I just at some point early on I just said I'm going to go with my direction. And then when I had sent in the first book pencils to Mike to show him what I had done, he just said, "Looks great." So
Hey,
enough
that's
said.
that's great. Absolutely.
Yeah,
There's a feather
yeah,
in your cap.
yeah, yeah.
And so when it comes to world building, you have extensive experience in that. What's it like collaborating with someone who, I guess when you're someone like Mike Mignola and you've built this universe
Hmm.
that's spawned not just comics and graphic novels, but movies.
Hmm.
What's the experience like dealing with like because you're entering his world?
Hmm.
What's that like as a creator who has extensive experience building your own worlds?
Yeah. Well, I think if this had been a storyline that tagged into some of his previous story lines, I would feel more compelled to try to fit into what had already been done. But fortunately for me, this story just goes off into a world that we've never seen before, that has never ever been a part of the Hellboy universe. So I just felt like that was my opportunity now to just do do what I thought would be right for it. And maybe, they're always in the back of my head. Oh, I would like for a while try to maybe approach machinery and his use of black spotting and film noir kind of lighting and and a lot of shadows and all that. I sort of like to be able to do that, but at the same time, I felt like I wanted to show what things look like. I didn't want to simplify it too much. I wanted this to, again, to be a really immersive experience where the viewer sees what everything kind of looks like, really feels the technology, the realm that we're in, and kind of understands what everything sort of looks like. So I think there's just a lot more detail in it that I felt like I should do.
Excellent. And you've, I guess, world built for your own books, obviously contributed to Captain Henry, and then you've done a wide range of films,
Mhm.
both North American and international. How does your approach to world building, or for anyone that's like just starting in the business and thinks that that's something they might like to do, what's your approach to world building?
Well, I think you decide right from the start what what are your references? What's your style you're looking to be? Because every project can be completely different and have a completely different set of requirements. And maybe the on a film project like with Pixar or DreamWorks or somebody that they kind of establish the parameters, and then you're um, you're trying to make them happy. You're trying to make the director happy. And in this case, I felt like I wanted to make Mike happy, but I also wanted to make myself happy because it's a long process of working on 4 books. It's actually was about a year in time from beginning to end. So if it's you every day just alone at the drawing board or at the computer, you want to really love what you're doing. And so uh, that was important for me to be very stimulated with doing my ideas. Um, but so the early choices were to make this sort of a retro, almost like a steampunky kind of world. So I didn't want it slick and modern looking. I wanted it to feel very ancient, but yet not medieval. I sort of picked a time period of what the machinery and technology of this world would be like. And so I guess that would be from the Industrial Revolution to through maybe World War II. There's like a kind of nuts and bolts and gears and knobs and cables, and it's a clunky technology that you feel like you understand. And there was a film project I worked on for Titan AE, and that was sort of, I called it World War II punk.
Right.
And it was like taking the 40s, maybe a touch of the 30s, but more like the 40s kind of technology, but still with a lot of rivets and bolts and things. And using that as a reference point to design the world building for Titan AE. And so much of it I just have always loved that I brought some of that into the Graveyard of Time to use as my starting point. And then, there's always like it running in the back of my head too. There's like, uh, a little Jack Kirby, maybe a little Wally Wood, a little Jim Steranko, people who I felt were also great at world building and put a lot of detail into really fleshing it out very fully so that you felt like you were really stepping into a time and a place. So that's sort of once I had that sort of direction of where to go, then I could kind of put on the blinders to everything else and then just kind of laser vision focus into just going with that direction.
Okay, that's cool. That makes a lot of sense. And then when you're like on a film project or you're doing a comic books, not necessarily related to the Graveyard of Time, is it, I guess, preliminary discussions that you have with the production team or the writer, or is it the script? What is it that kind of gets you cooking for what kind of world you're going to make?
Oh, well, there's a wonderful part of every film project where more in the past than now, which is going to be sort of a statement on how things have changed over time. But in the past, there was more of the old Disney model of making movies where they would spend months and months, or maybe even a year or two, just exploring on a film project before even really approaching any kind of level of pre-production. They would just let maybe a group of artists each do their own ideas on what they think would be right for this story, and with very little restriction whatsoever, except just follow the script. But then whatever your vision might be, just go for it. We just want to see what you do, and then eventually we'll start making some decisions. We'll narrow down the team to maybe one or two key people, and then we'll start getting specific. So that first stage of freedom to just explore whatever you want is an amazing time. And over time, I think the studios got more and more money conscious and more under pressure to be profitable. And so they eventually streamlined that all down to the point where I would get hired and other people would get hired, and they just go, okay, here's what we're doing. What does this place look like? What does that place look like? Just build the sets, build the locations, not really explore. I mean, explore the idea of, oh, say there's an underwater castle, but maybe give us a couple different iterations of it, but don't go wild in different tangents. We want to get this done. We want to move into production, and we don't care so much about uh, your stylization ideas or anything. We kind of already know what it's going to look like style wise. It's most of the movies and animation. The world is pretty realistic. The characters tend to be very exaggerated sometimes, but they're pretty much hooked on a real world, real lighting, real details and textures and things. So um, that that joy of having that time of freedom is pretty much gone. And the practicality of doing comic books, you know, you you sort of have to be conservative in how much time you waste, uh, and you sort of
Yeah.
need to get going. I mean, you need to produce and get paid and trust your instincts more. So in that sense, I think it just sit at the table and go and start producing pages. Focus less on a big period of freedom and exploration, and just start making quick decisions, and then just start thumbnailing out your storyboard panels and pages, and then just get going.
Right. And then obviously the deadlines in comics are crazy. So
Yeah,
or can be crazy.
yeah,
So that's kind of limiting when it comes to creativity unless you have a shorthand already built into your repertoire.
right. Yeah, I think if it was a wildly lucrative profession and you were hired on a book project that had a lot of time and comfort and and uh, and advance money, maybe you would relax and slow down a little bit and try to do something more unusual that you hadn't done in the past. But very often people will hire an artist like myself because of what you already do. And then they'll just go, do what you do that. Don't try to do anything else. We want you and your style. And so just get busy.
Yeah, I've always said that an artist, a letterer, doesn't matter, in a comic book is almost like casting in a movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because that's the look that you're gonna get or the tone that you're gonna get. And I know there are different components in a film where you have like a DOP and sound design and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff,
sure, sure.
but those are all elements that make like the reading experience in a comic book special or unique, as well as the visual experience in the film.
Yeah, it is a one person vision for the most part, especially if you do your penciling, your own inking, and your own coloring. You are all those different um, divisions of a film project. You're the set decorator, you're the cinematographer, you're the production designer, the art director, you're the storyboarder, you know, you're
Yeah.
you're you're everybody rolled into one. And so in that sense, it's actually very satisfying. I think one of the things about working in animation and live action is not very many people really see your artwork outside of the team.
Right.
And I always liken it to the end of the first Indiana Jones, where when a film production is over, all that artwork gets crated up and taken to Warehouse 51 and stacked on the top of thousands of other crates of artwork from other productions, never to be seen again by any human beings. And so, you might produce hundreds of pieces of artwork on a film, and maybe there's a just maybe 20, 30 people in the studio will see it, and that's it. Although, now when they do these art of the making books,
Yeah.
they'll select out some pieces to show, and then you go, oh, actually, somebody's going to see my artwork. Cool. But when you see the movie, uh, your artwork often is never used, or maybe you've influenced the way things look, or maybe they may take one or two or three or more of your actual pieces of artwork, but then it's reinterpreted again and it's redesigned and painted or illustrated by an in-house color specialist and lit differently, and so it's not like you can say, oh, there's my artwork. But in comic books, man, there's your artwork.
Every panel, every page.
That's you all over. So there's nowhere to run and hide,
Yeah.
which is a little nerve-wracking sometimes.
Oh,
That,
for sure, for sure.
like I find that inking is a strange process that um, inking takes a lot of time and work. It's really the hardest part for me of the slog of doing books. Penciling is kind of fun and loose
Yeah.
and liberating and joyous, and so is coloring. But the inking is where you're down in the nuts and bolts, and every line becomes kind of precious. And you think you're doing a pretty good job, but then when you scan your final art pages and put it into Photoshop or whatever program you're going to color in. And then you start enlarging it a little bit and you're looking at your inking going, oh, that is awful inking. It just, you're blowing it up. So you're seeing a lot of the imperfections of it. And you have to have faith that when it's really shrunk down onto a page, all will be forgiven by the viewer, and they'll not think your inking sucked.
Yeah, inking is, well, they're all skills, right?
Yeah,
But it's amazing how a lot of pencilers can't translate their pencils because inks are so final and they tend to
yeah,
reduce some of the fluidity of pencils.
right.
And so if you don't have that kind of like sensibility, it can really change your own pencils. Like a lot of pencilers have trouble inking their own work.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, a lot of people feel that their work gets ruined. I mean, there's debates all the time about old stuff too. Like certainly like Jack Kirby. People were going, "Oh, Vince Colletta, he ruined it. He whited out half the detail and da 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 da."
Yes.
And so you can really kind of get caught up in that. And I did too. I mean, when I did Thor for Marvel, I really did not like the inking, and I was a kind of a bit of a miserable experience to put so much work into your pencils, and then the world sees the final
Mhm.
inked version, and it just has lost what you did in your pencils, and so it can be really discouraging, and then maybe that's why a lot of pencilers learn how to ink. It's just
Right.
that they just can't take it.
Or even just I have a couple of buddies who just darken their line work because they do everything digitally,
Right, right.
right?
Yeah, I mean, a couple books I've done, like the Atomic Legion and Primordial, I just used my pencils. I penciled very tightly and then scanned it in and then maybe darkened the pencils a little bit more. But I liked a little bit of the gray tone value of pencils having some quality and variation to the line work. And then if you really wanted things to be extra dark, you could make it dark. But I really did. I do enjoy doing that process quite a bit. But then there's also something beautiful about just uh, either black or white,
Right.
solid white, solid black. That contrast, that power of a strong line or a strong shape is pretty mesmerizing too.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And I guess changes in printing have kind of changed how we do the art and how we perceive the art.
Right,
And
right.
so with that, how have things changed since you started both in film and in comics to where
Mhm,
it is now in terms of like how you approach the work or what you're producing?
mhm. Well, the old way of doing comics in black and white with color was that you worked on different layers. Your inked work was sort of a top layer that you would set on multiply in Photoshop, and then you would color underneath it or maybe on top of it. And you actually had to do some technical steps so that it would all merge together to look right. But when you send it to the publisher, you would send a separate ink layer, you would send a separate color layer, and you had to make sure everything registered correctly. And then the publisher would then do all their tricks to the process so that it would print correctly. And nowadays, you just send in a flat file of the artwork. You can do whatever you want when you're working on it, but you just flatten all the layers and you just send them one finished piece of artwork for the page, and you can kind of skip a step or two of technical tricks that can be time consuming. So that kind of simplifies the process quite a bit. I think what's changed the most maybe for me in animation is just that um, there's just more focus on realism in animated movies. The idea of stylizing or exaggerating the worlds and creating different looks and feels, it pretty much feels like most movies want the world to look real. There's a sort of a holy grail, which I understand from the point of view of filmmakers in animation, where they want to conquer reality. They want to go, look, every blade of grass, every streak of light through the trees is dappling the setting in special ways, or we're getting like a solar flare burn from the sun, or every rock has all these little divots in it. They want to completely master um, the way that their technicians can do full realism. So to me, it's too bad because that certainly wasn't the roots of animation. And I think too it will return again because after hundreds and hundreds of movies all looking real with uh, frame from left to right, top to bottom. The screen is full of texture and detail and information, and then the editing style gets faster and faster too. So you're cutting faster, you're showing more detail. The eye is really getting overwhelmed, and even the animation is bigger, wilder, more extreme, more exaggerated, a lot more movement. So I know there's a lot of filmmakers that rebel against that and want to do things differently, and that's where I hope things will go more and more. And I don't want to do photorealism. I mean, the camera can just take a picture. And why I looked at one Pixar movie and I went, this looks so real. What was the point? Why not just take a camera and go out into the woods and just shoot it and then lay in your animation on top of it? I don't get it. I don't get it. But it's sort of like the challenge of
Mhm.
being able to do it to the point where it's mastered and magnificent. So
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because like I think of like when I was growing up and you looked at the masters in art and they all have their different periods and it's like you have your photorealist type of artists and then you're like you said they're painting every single blade of grass or they're getting the light reflecting off the skin of their subjects or painting a bowl of fruit that could
yeah.
have been a photograph, and this is kind of before photography was an actual thing. And then you have your impressionists, and like so
Mhm.
like my favorite group of artists painters are the group of seven Canadian
Oh
collection
yeah.
artists,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
impressionists, and I like Gauguin and all that stuff. And then when you transfer it to comics, you can like Kirby,
Mhm.
and you could also like Neil Adams, or you can like Mark Silvestri, or you can
Right.
like Scotty Young. And so it's what's pleasing to the eye, and
Mhm.
how does the line work, or how their storytelling, how does that appeal to you? And for some, they love the 90s, and then there's some people that love, the 80s or the 60s or the 70s. So like I get the pull and the tug and everything, but it's that point where you're not quite real
Mhm.
that to me works better.
Right.
And me personally, because I was young, I guess Kirby's heyday was finished when I was finally kind of getting into it.
Mhm.
I didn't get Kirby till I got older,
Oh yeah. Right.
right? Like I
Yeah.
was a John Romita guy. I love Sal and John Buscema, George
Oh yeah.
Perez,
Mhm.
but I now get Kirby. Kirby's energy,
Right.
Kirby's about dynamic, and as you're saying, being a world builder.
Yeah.
And everybody's basically gone off of Kirby. The Wally Woods were around, Ditko. Like
Mhm.
everyone had their style, but
Mhm.
they're just some that set the temperature, and everyone else kind of went from there.
Yeah, there's an interesting line to straddle with all that because I mean some people well, I guess when I was growing up too, I believed in the images. They call it, suspending disbelief.
Right.
You have your ability to go, this is real, even though it's not. It's magical, it's supernatural, whatever. I mean, there's a guy flying through the air, but I'm suspending my logical brain and I'm falling into that panel, and you're living the story as it goes from panel to panel. So and looking back on that artwork now, I'm thinking, well, it's actually they were almost like cartoonists.
Yeah.
Really, they weren't realists. They whether it was Ditko or Wayne Boring doing Superman or Bob Kane doing those, and Dick Sprang, the Batman's. Uh, when I first read those, it didn't bother me that they were very exaggerated, cartoonish styles. I was able to fall right into those stories and believe every moment of it. And then things did get more realistic, which, maybe further helps the ability to suspend disbelief. But I don't think that you need to abandon the exaggerated styles. And of course, I you could count, 100 maybe artists that are still doing exaggerated cartoonish styles, but I don't think it should exclude the viewer from experiencing the reality of how the story feels. Um, and I kind of fall a little bit in between. I think I want some exaggeration and style, but I think I want it to feel a little bit real at the same time. So I'm kind of in the middle. I mean, I was even in the beginning on the Hellboy book, I was sort of like, maybe I'm just going to go full bore, exaggerated and cartoony, exaggerated like Mike Mignola would do. Mignola would do, and and then I couldn't do it because I felt like it wasn't me, first of all, but also I wanted a certain level of believability or realism to what I was doing, which may be my own insecurity or shortcoming, but that's sort of the way it goes for me. I mean, a lot of people, I think, have criticized my work because it's not real enough or correct enough. Things aren't always just right or perfect or symmetrical or whatever or stiff. But that's sort of where I go. I just want uh, enough realism to relate to the story, but enough exaggeration to make it a sense of wonder feeling or fantasy or magic to it at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I think of like Frank Miller's Daredevil,
Hmm.
and would it have been the same if Klaus Janson didn't ink it?
Right. Yeah.
right? And just like his line work, or even John Romita Jr. and Bob Layton's inks
Oh yeah,
on Iron Man,
right,
right? And how shiny and metallic Bob Layton's finishes were.
right, right.
And it worked for that project. And there are countless other ones, like, and even in modern times, where you think if you had it, if you know, if I don't know, let's say Ivan Reyes had a
Mhm.
different inker, would his Aquaman work be,
Mhm.
you know, regarded as it is? And so all
But
these things, this artistic decisions, as well as the project and the timing, they all go into making what we
yeah,
have, as the art form.
yeah, we're maybe getting a little bit too deep into the weeds for some of these young audience members here, but I think the perfect example of that was way back when Kirby was doing Thor and
Right.
Chick Stone was inking.
Yeah,
And
Chick Stone.
I like Chick Stone's
Yeah, me
inking.
too.
It was thick and cartoony looking,
Yeah.
uh, and kind of graphic looking. There was a real solidity to it. It never bothered me at all. But when Vince Colletta took over and started doing Thor, I went, wow, this feels classical.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
almost like Hal Foster doing Prince Valiant. Suddenly Thor had a more realistic believability to it, where it felt like it was we're reading the classics illustrated or something. And I didn't know anything about the debate that now exists. I didn't know what Vince Coletta was leaving out, or
Right.
I forgave all the weird scratchy line work and awkwardness of a lot of his work, but it just more fully pulled me into the stories than when I think Chick Stone was reading it. So the debate will go on and never be resolved. But I think that's a great example of maybe how two different styles can attract people for their own reasons,
Oh, yeah.
but both are valid, I guess is the point.
Totally. And I see a guitar behind you, and I think the same goes in music, right? So you
Right.
can get certain guitarists would play a riff or whatever, or drummer would have certain fills that another drummer wouldn't have, and it totally changes a song,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, just how it goes.
Don't make me play my guitar, by the way.
Well, I play guitar, quote
Oh, dude.
unquote.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm at the point now where cats don't wail, so it's all
Oh,
good.
good. Good. Is that because they're getting old and deaf now, or?
Maybe the cats are getting old and deaf. Yeah. Has nothing to do with me. So, who are your influences to get you into animation and comics?
Well, um, of course, comics. I think like all of us, the the period that's the most profound for when we're reading at a young age. Maybe up until high school or something. Whoever whoever you're reading at that point, when your imagination is so fertile and your ability to suspend disbelief is so heightened, I think that's going to be who you are influenced by. I mean, I think I'm certainly that way. It was, Kirby and Wally Wood and Jim Steranko and you know, I think by the time Neil Adams came along, I was already sort of past that point in my uh, ability to use imagination and I just thought, oh, it's beautiful, but uh, it didn't grab me. I think, like when Barry Smith was first doing
Right.
Conan, it was such a sea change. Uh, uh, it's interesting to me because I look back now on those, and they are so incorrect. The faces, the
Yeah.
anatomy, the proportions, everything. I can look at it and go, that's wrong, 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 wrong. How could it? I would never do that. Those,
Right.
this is all wrong. Yet at the time, it was so bold and exciting, and I guess I was still had enough of an acceptance in my heart that I just thought this is a whole new look for comics. And of course, some people like Barry Smith and Jim Steranko, you follow how they progress in a relatively short time. Sometimes it's within a year. They've gone from fledgling beginner to master in a lot of ways. And their work 12 months later is sublime compared to their first work. And that sort of happened, I think, with Barry Smith too. Like when he started really rolling on Conan towards the end of his period with it, it was like uh, illustrated classics. It was sort of like the Thor we were talking about, but in a different way. I mean, Barry Smith just brought the art of illustration to comics to a whole new level, and so I've never tried to emulate Barry Smith, but I certainly um, feel the influence of his work on how nicely I want things to look sometimes. And in animation, I just had the old Disney movies in mind. Each one was different, whether it was the beautiful watercolory feels of Pinocchio or uh, more of the opaque painterly style of Lady and the Tramp. And then when Sleeping Beauty came along, Sleeping Beauty was sort of like one of those watershed moments, almost like Barry Smith and Conan, if I can really struggle to grasp at two different straws at the same time. But Sleeping Beauty was designed by Ivan Earl, and to me is sort of like a zenith in the art of illustration and animation. And so I think he is probably one of the more profound influences on my approach to um, animation work, and also my own personal work. Now I'm doing my own landscape series based on Northwest art landscapes, but I'm constantly thinking about Ivan Earl and how it's stylized, but yet it's so beautiful. And it's so real at the same time where you fall into this space. It's a little magical, but yet it's also still relatable. Like this could be a place you have been, or maybe you will go to, but yet it's fantastic at the same time. So that's like a great ambition to achieve something like that. And I don't always do it, of course, but I'm always trying.
Yeah, and that's the goal. That's the key. But I'd say you're succeeding for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so we're gonna wrap it up. And I've had a great time chatting with you. But I have to know, with your current project, and it's a 4-issue miniseries, Graveyard of Time. Will we see more? And will we see more of your own stuff? Will we get more Zone Continuum?
Oh,
What's
well,
what's in the future for you?
I sure hope so. I mean, I honestly, the next step's going to be maybe determined to some degree by how well the Captain Henry book does, because it is a departure for Mike and the Hellboy world to do a book like this. And we don't know if it's going to be a failure, a noble failure, or whether it's going to succeed or not. So uh, I think people are just kind of, well, we just got to wait and see when the first book comes out. Well, how were the sales and what is the reaction? And then that's going to determine the future of that series. But certainly, I'm chomping at the bits to get back to the world of Captain Henry. I mean, Captain Henry's a great character, and his sidekick is a great character. And I have to say that when Mike and I approached the idea of what these two main characters were going to look like, we we pulled an idea or two from our love of cinema
Uh,
to choose uh, which maybe actors we wanted to emulate the look of. And so I think any reader after they've seen enough of the first book and then the second book, the next characters, and I think they're going to go, oh, I get who this guy is trying to be, and it's going to be fun. But I just think I would love to get back to those characters. And the way we left the first book, the first series, is of course that story arc wrapped up and finished, but it opened the door for more adventures to where I can't even imagine where we could go. It could go anywhere. It's so wide open the way the story ends. So I would just love to take it to the next story arc and see what we could do. And in some small way too, I think what else I'm going to do with Dark Horse or other publishers might depend also on what Captain Henry does, because I haven't found a publisher for sure yet on the Zone Continuum, and I'm dying to continue that series. And I I I think just can't predict yet when I can do it and who I could do it with. Same with Primordial and some other things. So I think if Captain Henry does well, then doors really do fling wide open with Dark Horse and maybe other publishers. But I've got so many characters and stories I'm dying to do, and right now I'm not able to point at what is in the works that's going to be next. I'm going to have to wait a couple months and then see how it all kind of lays out.
No, that's awesome. Well, Bruce, it was a pleasure speaking with you and learning more about Captain Henry and the Graveyard of Time. It was, as always, a pleasure catching up with you and seeing how you're
Indeed.
doing. And I totally look forward to doing this again. I would just want to thank you for coming by the podcast and spending some time with us.
Well, I thank you so much, Steve. And as always, great to see you. You're a real pal. And
Absolutely. It's
I
great.
look forward to our next chat.
All right. Thanks. Looking forward to
Thank
it.
you. Bye bye.